Hi, this is chess expert Daniel Weisbarth with Silver Knights, and I want to show you a game from a recent tournament training class. The white player in this game was named George, and the black player was named Matthew. And they play kind of normal good opening moves, which means that they're bringing out their knights and their bishops, which is called developing, and moving them towards the center. And you'll notice that at this point black has castled and white develops his last bishop. And black has to be really careful because in this position white is setting up what's called a pin, which is that the white bishop is attacking the black knight, and if the black knight moves, the bishop would take the queen behind it. And pins are really tricky. They're a fundamental chess tactic, and you have to be good at both defending them and using them. And this game has a nice lesson in what happens if you don't defend a pin well. So in a tournament training class, we might go through all the different ways that you might try to defend this pin, like pushing h6, or trying to move your queen away, or a few other ideas. But I think that what probably black should have done in this position is move this bishop on c5 back to e7 to break the pin. And the point of bishop e7 is that now, if the knight leaves, the bishop is just attacking the bishop. That's not what happens in the game, though. And after bishop g5, black plays pawn to d6. Now, in some ways, this makes a lot of sense because it lets out this bishop on c8 and maybe is thinking about setting up black's own pin. But white does something smart here, which is the knight on f6 doesn't want to move, because if it does, the bishop will take the queen behind it. And there's a saying in chess called pin and win. And what that means is that when you have a pinned piece that you know can't move away, it's a really good idea to attack it again. And so the white player uses a standard maneuver to attack the knight again by moving his knight to d5. Now black's knight is attacked twice by the bishop and the knight, and it's defended twice by the queen and the pawn. But it's not perfect for black. And to see why, watch what happens after black develops their bishop and white takes the knight. Now, black has two ways that they can take back here, one with the pawn and one with the queen. The problem is that black doesn't really want to take back in either of these ways. If the queen were to take back, the bishop would just capture her, and a bishop's worth a lot less than the queen. So even after the pawn takes the bishop, it's terrible for black. So black has to take with the pawn. And now the pawn is attacking the bishop leaves, it attacks black's rook. The black rook leaves, and now one thing to notice here is that there was an even trade on f6 of a knight for a knight. But there's now a problem for black, which is that the black king is not so safe now. And there's a half-open g-file to attack black's king. And so white at this point is trying to figure out ways to get rid of the pawns on the g-file or to get the queen or a rook out there. And so the first thing he does is he attacks the bishop. Now if black were to play bishop takes knight here, that would work really well for white. Because either way white takes back, either with the pawn or with the queen, we're going to be able to use the open g-file to attack black's king. Either the queen would be able to move over to g3 or g4 to do it, or the rook would come to g1 after the pawn leaves. So that's not a great option for black. So after h3, black goes to h5. White attacks it again, the black bishop leaves, and white plays pawn g5. And the idea for white is that if black were to take here, white would think about taking back or moving the rook over to try to take back with the rook a little bit later. And the point is that we're just opening up black's king and getting rid of the pawns in front of him. So black plays queen e7. White plays h4, guarding the pawn. Black moves the bishop to set up their own pin on white's knight to the queen. And white plays a very sneaky move. He plays rook g1. And it's really important to notice what the rook is doing on g1. One thing is that it's pointed at black's king. The other thing is that white has a really big threat here. And black doesn't quite notice and tries to copy white's maneuver from earlier in the game by playing knight d4. And the good thing about knight d4 is that it does put pressure on the white knight, and I think it shows that the black player in this game was doing something smart, which is he'd had his own problems with a pin on his knight, where the knight was attacked more times than it could easily be defended, where he went on to lose the knight. But in this situation, while that's a good idea, white has a really immediate, big, crushing threat. And white just follows through now, and it's basically the end of the game. And white plays g takes f6. And the really important thing to notice about g takes f6 is that when the pawn leaves, it's check from the rook. And so black has to move their king to g8, and now white can take the queen basically for free. And at this point, black's in even more trouble, because if black does something like play bishop takes knight, white in this position actually has a checkmate in 3 moves. And if you want to, you can pause the video and try to solve it. So I'll count to 3 and then I'll show the solution. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what white can do here is play bishop g7 check. Black's king can't take because of the rook, so the king moves over. Bishop f3 check, so it's check from the rook again. Now the king can't move anywhere because the white bishop and the white pawn cover all the escape squares. So black's only moves that they can make are to block with this bishop, and after the bishop blocks, white gets checkmate, either by taking with the rook or by moving the queen out. So this is a good game, and it shows the value of a pin and how to utilize a pin. And in tournament training classes, these are the kind of motifs that we explore and that the kids learn from. Because after this game, the black player, Matthew, would have a much better idea of what to do to defend in this position. And probably he would find a better defense, like bishop e7. Where now, if white tries to continue as in the game, black can just take with their knight. And black is actually doing really well here. So this is chess expert Daniel Weisbarth with Silver Knights signing off. Thanks. Bye.